It looks like a very serious event, but we'll find out. When they look at the documents, I think people are going to see a lot of bad things happen. I hope it's not so, because if it is, there's never been anything like it in the history of our country. This was a terrible situation. What we're doing is we're cleaning everything up. It's so important. What I'm doing is a service to this country. We now call it Spygate. You're calling it Spygate. A lot of bad things have happened.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. That was President Trump earlier this week going on offense against the deep state. And the president didn't stop there. He wrote on Twitter today, quote, "The Democrats are now alluding to the concept that having an informant placed in an opposing party's campaign is different than having a spy, as illegal as that may be. But what about an informant who is paid a fortune and who sets up way earlier than the Russian hoax?" The president then wrote, quote, "Can anyone even imagine having spies placed in a competing campaign by the people and party in absolute power for the sole purpose of political advantage and gain? And to think that the party in question, even with the expenditure of far more money, lost." The president's comments are causing people like former CIA Director John Brennan to lash out. Take a look.
What's the difference between an informant and a spy?
Well, first of all, I think it's very typical of Mr. Trump to mischaracterize. He's a master of mischaracterization and dishonesty. But again, this is something that Mr. Trump is, as you said, masterful at in terms of twisting the truth in order to support his narrative. A lot of people are complaining that the FBI and the CIA and others didn't do enough to try to uncover what Russia was doing. Well, this is exactly what the FBI was supposed to do, and thank goodness they did it.
Joining us now with reaction is the author of the upcoming book, The Russia Hoax. Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton, and Washington Times columnist and Fox News contributor Charlie Hurt. All right, Greg, I'm going to start with you. Did the FBI have a legal basis to start a criminal investigation? Did they even have a sufficient intelligence basis to launch an intelligence probe?
They had neither, and the evidence is abundantly clear. And yet they launched this dilating investigation into then candidate Trump. They continued it with President Trump. And so the president is rightly outraged, and I'm happy he's expressing it, that they essentially used a spy to infiltrate his campaign, to elicit and induce and entrap people into saying incriminating things. If it was done for purely political reasons, and it appears it was, that is a crime. It's called abuse of power, deprivation of rights under color of law. They were depriving candidate Trump of his constitutional rights, his right to privacy and Fourth Amendment rights.
Okay, and Tom Fitton, I'm going to go to you. You know, there's a lot of talk about an informant and a spy. What is the difference between an informant and a spy, if there is one at all?
There is no practical difference. It's gamesmanship on the part of the Obama administration. The top leadership, which this week was forced to admit they did have someone targeting the Trump campaign who was on the payroll of at least one agency. We don't know, maybe more than one agency, which would have been without precedent within, at least in modern American history. You'd have to go back to the 60s to find anything similar in terms of governmental abuse. And when you hear Clapper and Brennan and Comey and the rest complain and criticize President Trump for highlighting their corruption, you're looking at a list of people who have, in my view, significant criminal and civil liability over what went on their watch during the Obama administration and after. And you know, and when you hear Brennan go crazy and attack Trump like he is, you have to wonder why on earth why on earth was he ever allowed near any counterintelligence investigation related to Mr. Trump? He obviously hated him, and it explains why things went off the rails they did under the Obama administration.
And you know, Charlie, when Tom says they obviously hated Donald Trump, I don't think that it could be any clearer. You had a whole cabal at the top of the FBI and in the intelligence community there who hated Donald Trump. And yet a year ago when Devin Nunes, and when it appeared that, you know, there was something cooking here, and they thought that, you know, the president was wearing a tinfoil hat and Devin Nunes was off his rocker, you know, it's all coming to fruition.
Oh, it really is. I mean, remember, everybody thought that Devin Nunes was behaving bizarrely, and he was meeting with intelligence officials in various secure locations at the White House grounds, and all of the press was making fun of him. And what we're seeing today is that basically all of the concerns that he sort of hinted at back then, over a year ago, have come to fruition. And as Tom pointed out, even the Democrats are having to acknowledge that yes, indeed, they did insert a spy into the political campaign, and I think it is absolutely unprecedented. We've heard of hints of this kind of thing back during the 60s and 70s.
Right.
It was not, I would argue, it's not nearly as bad and as extensive as this, because among other things, these people are actually they were actually actively punishing people, their political opponents, which is shocking.
It is shocking, and the amazing part of it, Greg, is that, you've got look, the Republicans now are looking at some people whose names we've only heard of. Bill Priestap. He's a guy who was the assistant director of the FBI counterintelligence. He was Strzok's boss. He helped change the name from, gross negligence to extremely careless.
Sure.
And then you've got Michael Steinbeck and John Giacalone, or whatever his name is. These are people at the upper echelon of the FBI being called before Congress. Do you think they're going to take the fifth? Do you think they're going to tell us what happened?
So far, they've been obstructing. The Judiciary Committee has for a year been trying to question people, high-ranking officials of the FBI, and the FBI has been refusing. That is obstruction of Congress. It is a classic trope for people to claim that the FBI cannot talk about a pending investigation. That is true except for Congress, which has a constitutional duty and a right under a lawful subpoena to obtain this information and testimony. It's obstruction of Congress to fail to comply, and the president is right to demand, as chief executive of the executive branch, that the DOJ and the FBI comply with the law.
All right. And Tom Fitton, I've given you a lot of credit in the past. You have done things that Congress hasn't been able to do. I mean, it's your determination and your perseverance in trying to get records under FOIA that has gotten things that Congress hasn't even been able to get. So, right now, we've got the FBI and the Department of Justice, as Greg says, who they're stonewalling, slow walking, and saying they don't have records when, in fact, they do have records, and they have been lying. What does the president do at this point? He is the chief executive. The FBI and Justice Department are under him. What should he do to get this information out?
He should order a mandatory declassification review of the documents within a reasonable amount of time, and have his lawyers in the White House counsel's office or some outside experts that he trusts review these records on any withholdings they actually want to follow up on, to make sure nothing's being withheld improperly. We've got these FOIA cases out there now. I mean, we're waiting on the text messages. There's a process now in court for these various text messages. He could order the Justice Department and the FBI start complying with the transparency law. These agencies don't think they answer to the president, and they don't think they answer to Congress. And I think what they're doing here, Judge, is they're protecting the Mueller operation, which has its origins in all of this spying and FISA warrants, national security letters where they're taking up the phone records of the campaign, unmaskings, and the use of the Clinton DNC dossier. That's all part of Mueller's operation now, and that's why they're resisting Congress, because they know if that gets uncovered,
so
Mueller's operation ends.
Tom, I have been very critical of the fact that the Republicans are not doing anything. I mean, I'm not being critical of those in Congress who are doing as much as they can, but it is time to get this thing rolling. It is time for consequences, accountability. That's why Donald Trump is president. And so, I'll go to you, Charlie. I mean, what do you say to those people who say, oh, these are just more hearings to make the Democrats look bad, or to force these people to testify to things they don't want to testify to, and that are protected national security issues?
They're stalling is what they're doing. They're all stalling. And, you look back at all the egregious things, I would say call them crimes, that were committed during the campaign and after the campaign. Why did they do it? The reason they did it with such abandon was because they thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election and none of this would ever come to light. And it wouldn't matter.
We
and
know
of course
that.
They're doing,
so what do we do now?
And they're doing the same thing now. And they think that they're going to win control in November, and the Democrats will,
Right.
and they can then go and cover all of it. I think that Tom Fitton's exactly right. The president should begin declassifying everything. They should blow everything out into and have an absolute showdown, because these people do work for the executive branch. They
work for
are
us.
answerable to the legislative branch.
Okay, and Greg, the final question to you. The significance of Strzok not testifying, is he cooperating?
Unknown. If I were him, I'd cooperate. First of all, it's always important to tell the truth. And second of all, he can cut himself a deal because he's in serious legal jeopardy.
Yeah.
But, this is a classic cover-up that's taking place in Washington.
Yep.
They always claim the mantle of